Hey, HouseGroups, welcome tonight on a Wednesday night. We are so happy that you're here. We're going to continue our HouseGroups teaching series called Talk with God. And to do that, I have Kris and Gil Irey with us. And they're going to be having this conversation with me as we learn about prayer and continue our conversation with a few parents. And so first, I just want to ask you guys, just tell us a little bit about yourself to give the students a bit into your world.
Well, I grew up in Albert Lea, Minnesota, so I'm a Minnesota girl, and grew up in a family that both my parents loved Jesus. And so as that kind of a background, I ended up going to Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota, where I played 4 years of basketball, so athletics were super important to me. And met Gil, married him for 36 years now. We have 2 children. Jamie's 32 and Jake is 28, almost 29. And we have 4 grandchildren.
Wow.
So we've lived here for 29 years. Jake was just a baby when we moved here. So.
Wow, fun.
And I grew up in North Dakota, farm boy, out in the middle of nowhere. My playground was 6 miles by 3 miles by 2 miles without seeing a neighbor. So I grew up out in the middle of nowhere and had parents who raised us kids in the church. It was kind of a traditional church. We went to church because we had to. They tried to impart upon us a lot of biblical truths, which most of them held. Some later in life rather than earlier, but typical farm kid. And I do believe that the whole process when we're talking about prayer is the prayer of my parents probably kept me out of a lot of trouble. That you can get in out on the farm when you have an unlimited supply of gasoline and bullets and you're a youngster, you can get into some real trouble, and we made it through that. So I always say is that it was praying parents and praying grandparents is what got us to the point where we are today.
For sure.
I can imagine that for sure. That is awesome. That is really cool. One thing with our students is we kind of look, and maybe we don't have the life experience yet to see that our prayers have been answered. You know, maybe they have been answered and we just don't see it, or we don't know what to look for, or maybe our biggest answered prayer is the unanswered prayer. Do you guys have any prayer stories of where you've seen God move, you've seen God work in your life, you prayed for something and you saw something happen? Just give us a little taste of that.
Yeah, we have. A lot of times it took, several days, weeks, months, years for us to see the results, and sometimes they happen fast and sometimes they happen slow. And one that I have is, so I have a bad back. I've had 3 back surgeries, and I was going to have my 3rd one, which was pretty big one for me. And I go talk to the doctor, and the doctor goes, "Well, Kris, what is the outcome you would like to have?" And this was before my surgery, and I said, "I would like to be able to hold my grandkids and get down on the floor and play with them," because I could not do that at the time.
Yeah.
And so we go ahead and I do the back surgery, and I have it. And a week after I got home, my daughter and son-in-law, who live in Arizona, flew home to see me, and they told us they were pregnant. And just was so happy for them. Then about 2 months later, I go back to the doctor for a checkup, and he goes, "Well, yeah, I just want you to know in about 9 months after surgery, you'll be able to hold 20 pounds. And then in about 2 more months, you'll be able to hold 30. And then like 2 more, you'll be able to hold 40. And we left that room, and I just almost burst into tears because prayer had been answered, that I'd be able to hold my grandchild, and just the timing of it all. And it wasn't coincidence, and it wasn't about me. It was God just being faithful to us in His timing. And that's just one.
That's cool.
Just one.
God's showing you how faithful He is
Yes.
to you.
Yeah.
And some would say, well, that's probably just a coincidence, but
No way.
There's no way.
There's no way. If you understand the timing of everything and how that came to be, and it's not about us, it's about him. It's all about Jesus.
Yeah.
And one of the neat things about that too is you don't know that prayer, how that's going to affect other people, because when we were there with the neurosurgeon up at Mayo Clinic, and we told him, you could tell that he was literally visibly touched by it to the point of tears welling up in his eyes at that time. So it was an unintended benefit out of that whole prayer that she was praying, is that this surgeon got to see something that literally moved him to a point of having some emotions. Not that physicians don't have emotions, but he's in that role. So that was very, very, very neat to see. So
that is so cool. Yeah. Such a great story.
Yeah. Well, we had growing up, there were a lot of prayers that I look back on my parents and my grandparents that I probably, they were probably praying overtime for me. Like I said, with my brother and I running around doing all kinds of stupid things. And I kind of call them the old crap prayers, is that if you've ever been in a Jeep and you grab a hold of the old crap handle just to hang on. And but I look back at that and I know that we put them through overtime on that as parents, and having now talked to them about that sense, it's very apparent that they were praying for us. Just like all the students here, their parents are praying for them too. It's a natural thing that a parent does, is pray for your children, and we prayed for our children, that God would bring godly spouses into their life, and and we didn't pray that they would be exempt from pain and suffering and all of that and struggle, because this side of heaven, you're either in a struggle, you're coming out of a struggle, or you're getting ready to go into a struggle. There's no other place that we occupy this side of heaven.
Yeah.
So as parents, I think it's vitally critical that we pray for our kids and teach our kids not to run from the struggle, but to run towards the struggle, to embrace it. And the way you embrace that is you embrace it by pressing into God, and you press into other people and your friends and your parents, and you pray through that and ask people to pray for you through that. There's power in that. And I just one story goes back 20 years, and I won't go all the way back into it, but about 20 years ago, I had a very wise mentor of mine challenge me to a daily prayer. And that prayer was, before I left the house, is a simple prayer, is, God, put in front of me those people you want me to add value to today. And I was committed to that prayer. I wanted to do that prayer to the point where I wrote notes where I would see them before I left the house. I'd write them on a dry erase marker on the mirror in the bathroom. So I would pray that prayer. And for 20 years, that has been part of my prayer life. And adding value can be anything from smiling to somebody, opening the door, being nice to a tenant at a gas station, and it can be all the way to pulling somebody from a burning building. Because that value, you don't know. So you pray that prayer every day. And then at the end of the day, you can take score. You can check your scorecard, how did I do? And if you didn't do so well, guess what? Next day is another round of golf. You get to go do it all over again. And I've had amazing different stories with that whole thing. But one thing, the first one, that you don't get to see the fruit of those prayers very often. Once in a while, God will open up a little thing, or sometimes he'll put you right smack in the middle of something. But a lot of times, if you think about it, just being nice to somebody or being kind to a clerk or somebody who's working somewhere, you may be the difference between their child getting beat that night when they get home or not. You might be that positive weight that you put on the scale of that person's day that just saves a horrible event from happening that night. You don't know. So, but you add value wherever you go. And the one that is on the far extreme of that was about a year ago. I was going up to Minnesota. I was going to pick my son up and my son-in-law, and we were going to go up to the lake. And I was driving up there and late at night, and I was going to get there about midnight. And about 3 different times during my drive up to Minneapolis, I was going to stop. I was going to stop and get a coffee. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I got to stop and get a bite to eat. No, I'm not going to. I'm just going to pound it through. So I just kept driving through the night, about a 3.5-hour drive. And as I get off by my son's house and come across the interstate, my heart just stopped. And as I come driving by, I see this car in front of me with the lights on. And as I go driving by on this bridge, as I see this guy, as I look out, is trying to throw this girl, this woman, off the interstate bridge. And my heart just goes a million miles an hour. And it's like, I've got to do something. It was the old crap prayer, right?
Yeah.
So in my truck, I whip around over the median, I come back around and I pull up. And then I'm really kind of in horror because he's not trying to throw her off the bridge. She's trying to keep him from jumping. So I'm there and I don't know what else to do, but I jump out of the truck. I get the guy in kind of a half Nelson. I'm against the bridge barrier and his girlfriend, wife is hanging onto him sobbing. And this car with the flashing lights is a lady who comes running back, and she had called the cops and they said, don't engage. I didn't get that message. So I just waited on in. And so I'm holding this guy and she gets back there and she's a Christian. And so we just start praying over this guy. And he doesn't speak any English. His wife speaks a little bit of English, but as this lady started praying, and I was letting her do most of the praying because I was doing the physical load, but this guy just starts to kind of calm down and he stops struggling as much. Well, then the police get there and they get this gentleman and his wife in the police car and they probably take him to the hospital, whatever. So I get to my son's house about 10 minutes later, I'm dripping in sweat and he's like, he goes, Dad, what happened? I said, we need to sit here and have a Coke and talk about it. So I shared that with him. So that was an example where I was not prepared that day when I left the house, but I prayed that prayer.
Yeah.
And I'm sure throughout the day, I probably had the ability to maybe say something positive, but that was one of those where I got to see full hand. And I'm not saying that, well, I guess I am saying is that God, I think, orders all of our steps every single day. And that was one of those where after 20 years of praying that prayer, the message I got from God was, don't stop. Don't stop. That can be one of the most powerful things that you can do, is that little simple popcorn prayer. It's not getting on your knees. It's not making a whole big deal out of it, but it's just God put in front of me those you want me to add value to today. And that's one of the crazier ones that I've had.
Yeah.
So
wow, those are two. I mean, I love those stories because it's so clear that God was moving, He was working, and like you said, sometimes we don't get the chance to get let in on this side of heaven, where we don't get to necessarily see the impact. But on those two, it's pretty clear, pretty obvious. God was working. We had prayed a prayer, and then God shows up. Maybe not in the way we expected. Maybe we didn't expect to be on the side of a bridge that night. But
if you're gonna pray that prayer, you better be ready.
You got to be ready for it. That is cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. Because like I said, sometimes as high school students, we're not like right on the verge of seeing all these prayers that we've been praying all throughout high school. But they happen. God shows up in very real, tangible ways. And sometimes we get a chance to see it. And so I appreciate getting a chance to hear a couple of yours. One other thing I want our students to hear is like, is there something that you, a way for students to pray for their parents? So we're going to encourage our students to start praying for the people around them. If you had to say one thing as a parent of a high school student, what would you have liked prayer for in your time?
Boy, looking back at that, I guess I would, and I think this is a great prayer, and Kris, again, she brought this into our marriage, but just as prayer for grace and mercy, because we're not perfect. We live in an imperfect world, and we're imperfect parents, and we bring imperfect children into this situation. And so I think the biggest thing and I feel that our kids gave that, we tried to give that to our kids, and I feel like we got that back from them. Just the whole grace and mercy thing and understanding, because then your parents are just as screwed up as you are as kids. I mean, I'm serious. It's just because you cross over this certain age, you still got the same temptations, the same issues. Maybe you're a little better equipped to keep them in check and deal with them. But we're fallen people living in a fallen world. So I think for kids who are so inclined to pray for their parents, to just pray that God's protection would be over their parents too. And
they need it just like we need.
They exactly.
That same
and maybe
prayer.
even more. Even more. So
wow, that's good. That's great.
Yeah, and I think understanding that that your parents aren't perfect, you're not perfect, but how can we not bring each other to kind of fury. Like, it talks about that in the Bible, about not getting your children, what am I trying to say?
Don't bring them direct. Don't make them too mad. Make them a little bit mad, but
A
not
little
rat.
mad.
little mad is good. Don't make them angry.
Don't make them angry.
But in that, wanting our kids to understand why we're doing why we said what we did, why we're not allowing them to do what they might want to. It's because we love them. And it's the number one thing Jesus calls us to do, is love one another. And parents love their kids.
Yeah.
They do.
That's so cool. Well, this has been a really great conversation. I think all of our students are going to look back, and I think some of our parents will be watching this too, and will say they're really grateful that they've got a chance to kind of peek into the parents' lives, praying for their kids. Any last minute, anything that you just would like to share with our students or our parents as we kind of close out this time together?
I would say just lean in to your friends that can help you become better at praying, and not be afraid. Be bold and courageous in their prayers. Don't be afraid to just put an arm around a friend and pray right on the spot. I wish I might have been more of that when I was in high school, but I felt like I got there, and I hope I'm there for my friends now.
I guess I'd say the biggest thing is don't overthink prayer. Is that the most effective prayer is not the one that's filled with the holy language and the flowery language and all of that, because the one point is that God is our Father. And as a father, what would get me to call to action more than anything is help me, Daddy. I mean, you want to see a dad go into overtime is to hear his little child saying, help me. And I think that's probably one of the most powerful prayers that we can say, because our God, our Heavenly Father, Abba, Daddy, is sometimes that's, the best prayer you can say is just help me. And don't get intimidated if some people are really, really quote unquote good at praying, because it isn't necessarily how they pray, it's the condition of the heart and where it's at. And don't get intimidated by that. So.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Kris, Gil, thank you so much for joining us here today. I know our students really appreciated it, and we will meet back at HouseGroups later on. So thank you guys again.
Thanks.
Our pleasure.